Into our possession has come a whole bundle of documents going back to the implementation of the Human Rights Act in 1998. And what is really interesting about these documents, as the ECHR is written into British law, as we debate what's going to happen, what it's going to mean, we were given some very strong reassurances.
Reform UK's Northern Betrayal. The mask slips on Britain's fake populists. Right. Before we absolutely eviscerate Reform UK's breathtaking hypocrisy, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally change how you see these so-called champions of the working class. This is a kind of brutal political analysis you simply won't find anywhere else. So ring that notification bell and buckle in for a masterclass in unmasking political charlatans. Let me paint you a picture that perfectly encapsulates the state of modern Britain. I'm writing this somewhere between Sheffield and Manchester on what can only be described as a rolling testament to our national decline, a rickety East Midlands rail carriage that embodies everything wrong with how this country treats its regions. The air is thick with the unmistakable aroma of burnt coffee and wet coats. The plug socket is about as functional as Boris Johnson's relationship with the truth. And the Wi-Fi? Well, you'd have better luck getting a straight answer from a politician during election season. Outside my grimy window, deindustrialized Britain unfolds like a depressing slideshow of neglect, boarded-up factories that once powered empires, crumbling warehouses that stored the world's goods, and hollow communities that literally built civilization. This isn't just scenery. It's a living museum of abandonment, a constant reminder how catastrophically we've been let down by those who promised to level us up. This is Britain in 2025, ladies and gentlemen. We invented the bloody railways, revolutionized global transport, and now we're limping along on a system held together by wishful thinking, extortionate fays, and the kind of willful blindness that would make an ostrich proud. But here's where the story gets properly nauseating, where the mask doesn't just slip but gets ripped clean off with surgical precision. Just days ago, Richard Tice, Nigel Farage's ever-faithful attack dog and purported champion of the forgotten masses, declared that Northern Powerhouse Rail, the desperately needed east-west high-speed connection that could transform Northern England, simply wasn't worth the investment. Too expensive, apparently. Madness, he branded it, presumably whilst lounging in his Dubai penthouse or perhaps surveying his rather extensive property portfolio from one of his many comfortable retreats. Now, if you're not already seething with righteous indignation, you should be, and here's why. If you subscribe right now, you'll understand exactly how this betrayal fits into a much larger pattern of Southern contempt for Northern ambition. There's something uniquely repulsive about privileged Southern gentlemen in their polished brogues lecturing Northern cities about what they deserve. These supposed tribunes of Boston and Clecton prance about like pint-hoisting rebels against the establishment. But when the veneer cracks, and it always does, their disdain for the actual working class becomes blindingly obvious. Let me be absolutely crystal clear about what's happening here, because this revelation will change everything you thought you knew about Reform UK. Farage and Tice aren't champions of the people. They don't understand us, they don't represent us, and they certainly don't fight for us. This isn't about fiscal responsibility or sound economics. We've already blown billions on unfunded tax cuts that primarily benefit people exactly like them. No, this is about geography, class, and power, the holy trinity of British inequality. Here's a test that exposes their true nature. If there were a high-speed line proposed from Guildford to Waterloo, connecting their comfortable constituencies to the financial heart of London, they'd be cutting ribbons and making speeches about British engineering excellence. But because this is Liverpool to Hull, Manchester to Leeds, Sheffield to Newcastle, the industrial backbone that people like them systematically destroyed and abandoned, we're told to be grateful for improvements to railway lines that were built when Queen Victoria was still in deep mourning for Prince Albert. The absolutely brilliant Bev Craig, leader of Manchester Council, hit the nail squarely on the head when she observed that these people fundamentally misunderstand what Northern Powerhouse Rail represents. This isn't some vanity project about shaving a few minutes off journey times, though God knows it will be welcomed by anyone who's ever attempted to traverse this country's transport network. This is about capacity, ambition, and unlocking the massive potential that's been systematically suppressed for decades. By 2040, NPR could inject £50 billion directly into our economy, transforming not just travel times but growth patterns, employment opportunities, and entire communities. It's about creating the infrastructure that allows talent to flourish, businesses to expand, and regions to compete on equal terms with the overheated Southeast. But here's what really exposes Reform UK's fraudulent populism, and make sure you're subscribed because this connects to so much more. They're simply not interested in building anything constructive. Reform UK isn't here to lift up the forgotten regions that Westminster has systematically neglected for decades. They are here to exploit that neglect to channel justified anger into division, pitting city against town, region against region, all whilst peddling another cheap culture war dressed up as fiscal prudence. It's a politics of resentment without the substance of solutions, and it's as predictable as it is cynical. You want to know what's absolutely maddening about this entire charade? Look at how the rest of Europe treats high-speed rail connections. Paris to Lyon in exactly 2 hours, door-to-door, comfortable, reliable, civilized. Rome to Milan before your morning cappuccino has time to develop a skin. Barcelona to Madrid faster than most of our trains manage to leave the station without breaking down. These aren't luxuries or indulgences. They're the basic infrastructure of a modern economy. But here in dear old Blighty, in the country that invented the Industrial Revolution, you'd need to win the national lottery twice to get from Liverpool to Hull in under 4 hours. Sheffield to Manchester? Just under an hour if the stars align, the leaves aren't on the tracks, and the driver remembers to show up. But if the weather so much as threatens to sneeze, you're looking at double that time, assuming the service runs at all. And yet, in our precious capital, you can whiz across dozens of miles in the better part of half an hour, with air conditioning, working Wi-Fi, and seats that weren't designed by someone with a personal vendetta against human comfort. The contrast isn't just stark, it's a perfect metaphor for how this country treats its regions. Still, Richard Tice, from the comfort of his various international residences, wants us to believe it doesn't stack up economically to invest in fixing these fundamental inequalities. This isn't fiscal discipline, and anyone who presents it as such is either lying or catastrophically ignorant. This is systematic regional discrimination dressed up in the language of responsible government. Every minute lost on clapped-out rolling stock that should have been retired during the major administration is a minute of lost dignity, lost investment, lost productivity, and lost hope. It's the compound interest of neglect, and it's been accumulating for decades whilst people like Tice lecture us about value for money. The uncomfortable truth, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you're missing the broader pattern here, is that Tice and Farage don't understand the North because they've never had to. Their Britain begins somewhere around the Cotswolds and ends in the city of London's wine bars. Beyond that lies terra incognita, a mythical realm they occasionally parachute into during election season for carefully staged photo opportunities with real voters before scuttling back to their home county's bolt holes to sneer at levelling up initiatives. They've never endured the soul-crushing humiliation of boarding trains that are genuinely older than they are, praying that the doors don't stick shut so you can actually disembark at your destination. They've never experienced the grinding frustration of watching opportunities slip away because Britain's transport infrastructure makes it easier to get to Paris than to the next major city north. They've never had to factor in an extra hour for a journey that should take 30 minutes, just in case the 19th century signaling system decides to have another existential crisis. Most importantly, they've never felt the devastating psychological impact of a transport system that constantly reinforces a message that you don't matter, that your time isn't valuable, that your region isn't worth investing in. It's death by 1,000 delays, and it shapes everything from where businesses locate to where young people choose to build their lives. Farage and Tice have never had to drag themselves to jobs they despise, working for managers who return their contempt in equal measure, or because geography and Britain's pathetic excuse for transport infrastructure have trapped them in economic amber. They've never had to watch their children leave for London because that's where the opportunities are, where the infrastructure works, where the investment flows. Their comfortable ignorance of northern realities isn't just unfortunate, it's actively harmful when they're making policy decisions that affect millions of lives. And here's a truly insidious part. They built their entire political brand on claiming to understand and represent these very people they systematically ignore and undervalue. I'm absolutely sick to death of being told to accept crumbs from the table while being lectured about gratitude by people who've never experienced genuine economic insecurity. The North isn't some charity case requiring sympathetic treatment from Southern benefactors. It isn't a museum piece to be preserved in aspic for nostalgic politicians to visit during campaign season. It's an economic power haze that's been artificially suppressed by decades of underinvestment and systematic neglect. The potential is extraordinary: world-class universities, innovative businesses, incredible talent, and communities that built the modern world. But potential without infrastructure is just frustration, and frustration without hope becomes a kind of anger that charlatans like Farage and Tice are so expert at exploiting whilst offering nothing constructive in return. And here's where the mask doesn't just slip but gets torn away entirely. When pressed on actual policy solutions, when asked to move beyond rhetoric to concrete proposals, they retreat into the same tired playbook of division and deflection. They'll rail against the establishment whilst being its perfect embodiment, promise to drain the swamp whilst wallowing in it themselves, and claim to champion the working class whilst implementing policies that systematically disadvantage them. Northern Powerhouse Rail isn't just about trains. Though decent, reliable, fast trains will be revolutionary for anyone who's experienced the current system. It's about dignity, opportunity, and the radical idea that geography shouldn't determine your life chances in a modern democracy. It's about creating conditions where businesses want to invest, where talent wants to stay, where communities can thrive rather than just survive. But that requires vision, commitment, and the kind of long-term thinking that's completely alien to opportunistic politicians more interested in the next headline than the next generation. It requires acknowledging that the North has been systematically shortchanged and that rectifying decades of underinvestment will require substantial, sustained commitment. Reform UK's position on Northern Powerhouse Rail reveals everything you need to know about their priorities and principles, or rather their complete absence of both. When push comes to shove, when they have to choose between their comfortable prejudices and transformative investment in forgotten communities, they choose comfort every single time. If Farage and Tice genuinely believe that northern communities will remain silent whilst they peddle this betrayal, they are welcome to come up here and defend their position in person. Preferably crammed shoulder to shoulder with the rest of us on a Northern Rail service grinding to another inexplicable halt, clutching a 6-pound coffee from the trolley that's probably older than the carriage, experiencing first-hand reality they are so content to preserve. That's assuming the service is actually running that day, of course, because even that basic expectation is apparently too much to ask in modern Britain. But don't worry, I'm sure Tice will be happy to explain for his comfortable Dubai apartment why improving this situation simply doesn't make economic sense. The mask has slipped completely now, and what's revealed underneath is as predictable as it is disappointing. Reform UK talks an impressive game about understanding forgotten Britain, but when confronted with the opportunity to actually invest in that Britain, to build something transformative, to create genuine opportunities for communities they claim to champion, they retreat into the same tired excuses that have justified decades of regional neglect. This is what happens when populist rhetoric meets genuine policy responsibility. It evaporates faster than morning mist, leaving behind only the uncomfortable truth that these supposed champions of the people are just another variety of comfortable politicians telling the regions to know their place and be grateful for whatever scraps fall from the table. So there you have it. Reform UK's northern betrayal laid bare, their populist credentials in tatters, their true priorities exposed for all to see. If you want more unflinching analysis of the charlatans and hypocrites who populate British politics, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on, because this is just the beginning. We've got plenty more masks to rip off, and I have a distinct feeling you won't want to miss a single revelation about the people